Hello and welcome to Enter the Boardroom with Newroll, the podcast exploring what makes great boards and board members. I'm your host, Oliver Cummings, CEO of Newroll, the board search specialist and market leader bringing science to the art of board hiring. Today's guest is Rachel Carrell, the CEO of KoruKids, who has scaled a mission-led, venture-backed business through regulation, crisis, strategic retreat, and intense public scrutiny, which makes her experience particularly relevant for boards. KoruKids is a UK-based childcare company, founded in 2016, which has delivered 4 million hours of childcare. Previously, she was CEO of DrThom, a healthcare company she grew to 1.3 million paying users in 3 countries. Rachel, welcome to Enter the Boardroom.
Hello.
Almost 10 years ago, you started KoruKids with a clear mission to solve childcare. What's been the most difficult board discussion on that journey where the right answer genuinely wasn't clear?
I think we faced a version of the same decision multiple times, which is, do we go narrow or do we go broad? And so I initially developed the service for a really specific purpose, which is we pick up your kids from school at 3:00 or whenever, 3:30, and we take them home to your house and we look after them and we give them a nice dinner and we do homework. And what you get in return is you get these calm, peaceful home life when you arrive home, and it's not frantic and a frenzy, and you get easy days in the week. And that's a really specific promise when we're solving a really specific problem. But as you just said, my mission was always much bigger than that. And it was to do with the whole of childcare. And there's so many problems to solve in childcare. And there are lots of countries in the world that we could think about. So for us, the problem has always been that there is a ton of opportunity, but we're not finished in the small niche that we're in. And so the decision along the way has always been, is it time yet? Is it yet? Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? It's time to broaden out, or should we stay like really perfecting our small little thing that we're doing? And I think we've taken the decision repeatedly, with one exception, which I think we'll get to stay in that little niche and perfect. And so we almost always chose narrow, but we kept coming back to the theme, and we do even now. I would say at almost every board we face this kind of, is it now? Is it now? And I think the difficulty is in that kind of second order consequences, not the immediate metric.
That resonates a lot for me as we think about building better boards and started with that core board search and advisory, and then evolved out into the Enter the Boardroom community, and also our board and leadership development, helping execs prepare for the boardroom. And as an investor, I spent my whole time saying focus, and then found myself as an operator sprawling out. And I imagine you, given your consulting background at McKinsey, had a similar journey. How has the board helped you with staying focused?
I think there have been various times when they've questioned the focus and various times when they've encouraged the focus. So I think we've had a lot of healthy debate, and there've been different, I've been doing it for 10 years now, and I've had various different incarnations of the board. So there've been different moments where the board is kind of saying, well, what about this opportunity over here? And shouldn't we be thinking about this and going a little bit faster? And I think that debate and probing is really helpful. And then there's been other times when, I've been the one saying, oh, I'm really excited about this. I just talked to someone in New York and I'm super excited about New York, and they've gone, whoa, Rachel, that's cool, but it's time to focus. And I think both of those, the truth should emerge from healthy debate, right? And I think one of the most important roles of a board is to be a sort of corrective to whatever the CEO is doing. So if the CEO is single-minded, and at times I am single-minded and focused, then I think it's healthy to go, okay, but is that right? Are you doing that too much? And if it's the opposite, which I frankly am probably more often the opposite, I think most founders are probably more often the opposite, then it's the corrective. You're kind of like this counterweight.
So that resonates. So definitely there have been times when the board has said to me, you need to be more focused. There have also been times actually when they've been really good about giving reassurance, like, no, you're doing the right thing, keep pushing on. But there have been times when I've wanted more clarity from them, where I've sort of been wrestling with several different options and wanted for them to just say, do this is the right path. And actually it's often proven difficult for them to do that, which has been somewhat reassuring for me to know that, okay, it's not that obvious. What has been most helpful for you from the board in those moments, and when has it been less helpful?
I think I exactly have had the experience you have, is where I wanted the answer. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. One of the things I do in my off moments, in my downtime, is I like to play the piano. And one of the reasons I love going downstairs at the end of the day and playing the piano is because you are either hitting the right notes or you're not. And the right notes are right there. And you're either doing them in the right time or you're not. And you don't have to think about it. There's no innovation, there's no strategy. And I think the reason I love that is because the rest of my day is just so ambiguous and you're constantly not sure whether, is it the right thing, is it not? So I love that feeling of like just being told the answer. And no, the board was never giving me, a piece of piano music to play, no matter how much I might have wanted it. But in hindsight, of course, if they had done that, I would have hated it. So it's, that is appropriate and inherent to the board's role. And it is true that they don't know the market as well as I do. No one knows my industry, my specific circumstances, the capabilities of my team, all the things that you would need to know in order to make the best strategic decision. Like it really has to be me.
So I guess for a board member listening, is the lesson there, be wary of that trap of offering certainty, which is what a founder is often going to think they want from you. But actually the most useful thing you can keep doing is asking questions, being curious, and helping them figure out the answer for themselves.
Yeah, I think asking questions, but there's a big footnote about that, which is asking questions, but never for question's sake. Never because you feel like you ought to be saying something and you're meant to ask a question, so just ask a question. I think that's transparent and annoying when people do that. But I think the best questions are the really thoughtful, insightful ones that cause a shift in thinking or a reframe. I also don't think it needs to be just questions. So one of the most useful things is when board members share relevant experiences. And you and I are both part of these groups where we meet, and I have what amounts to essentially my personal board. And I have 7 other founders that I meet with once a month. And we go through a really structured conversation. And you might, if any listeners are familiar with the YPO framework of the forum, it was inspired by that. It's basically exactly the same thing. And one of the cardinal rules of that group is you never give each other advice. What you do instead is you bring your experience and you tell it in great depth and in great detail. And the reason that is thought to be much more helpful is because you can then, as the listener, map whatever it is that you take from that conversation, from that experience that's useful. You can map it to all the complexity that is in your head, because no one, even a board member, even someone who's been with you on the journey, even someone who knows quite a lot, they cannot possibly know all the complexity of the decisions that you're facing. And so for me, it's been really useful at times when people have shared, when I was setting up, or when I worked for the portfolio company and they were setting up a sales function, and here's their story. Here's what happened, here's what they tried, here's what they didn't, here's what didn't work, here's what worked, and just present it as a kind of a gift, an object. This might not be in the context of a board meeting. This might be just a personal call or some other time. But presenting it, that kind of thing I have found immensely helpful.
So aside from that discussion around narrow versus broad, can you talk us through the 3 most significant moments in the boardroom on your KoruKids journey that a board member listening can learn from?
So I think one of them, one really significant decision that we faced repeatedly actually is choosing between term sheets when we've gone for an investment round. We've been very lucky to have multiple term sheets. I think every round we've done five fundraisers, and I think we had multiple for all of them. And So at times that has been, so I have investor board members, which is always an interesting dynamic as well, and one that you have to kind of navigate very carefully. And so when one of their term sheets was involved, of course, they would recuse themselves from that discussion. But I have really valued the board bringing different considerations beyond just the financial terms. Also just help weighing the financial terms. It's never just one thing. It's always weighing up 10 different parts of the financial term and thinking through the strategic implications of one investor or another, thinking through the values implication. So for example, this might have relevance for the other decisions we were talking about whether to focus or go broad. So for example, if we got a term sheet with slightly worse terms but an American investor who might therefore be able to help us in the American expansion, how should we think about that versus the UK one? When actually we don't currently trade in America and there's no guarantee that we will trade in America. So it becomes really tight. Those decisions become extremely strategic, not just financial.
Okay, so term sheets.
Yeah.
What about two other critical discussions?
Well, let me give you the headline to the second one. The second one was we went through a really big, I'll call it a PR crisis with when related to one of our investors who was actually the wife of Rishi Sunak. Really high public scrutiny. It was very emotionally charged, and the board was very helpful at that point. And then the third one was when we decided to shut down one part of our business, which was the home nursery part.
Okay, well, let's talk about that PR crisis. So I'm guessing from the way you talked about that, all PR is not good PR.
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, one saying I always quite like is you never know whether you're having a good day or a bad day. Because, you get told, oh, there's going to be a big story. We were headline news on every UK paper. We were literally the top headline. And we were also on the TV news. And it was because it had come to light that one of our investors, who was actually the wife of Rishi Sunak, had made an investment. Rishi Sunak had, and I need to be very careful I get the wording on this right, had not declared, I think that's right, it on the register of interest. And there was the insinuation that it had somehow influenced government policy, which literally everyone involved in this knew was totally absurd, given that it was a teeny weeny investment from an extraordinarily wealthy person. But nevertheless, this was kind of used, was seized upon by our party system, I guess. We were used as a political football, and so that's what happened. But like I say, you never know whether you're having a good day or a bad day. And my board actually helped me see that at that time, because their first question was, "And how's trading?" Which was actually pretty good. And there was a tweet I saw at the time where someone said, congratulations to the KoruKids marketing team for pulling a blinder. I mean, in one way, it was a lot of free publicity. And I think the reason that it was really great to have the board kind of putting things in perspective. The reason it kind of was a PR crisis, it kind of wasn't, though, because there was nowhere in the story was there any idea that we had done anything wrong. Like, not at all. No one even implied that. So it could have been a lot worse, and so I think it was just a matter of having that perspective and having that unmitigated support. And then the decision that we faced was, how much do we say publicly? Do we release a statement? So there's things like, should we email all our families? Should we put something on Instagram? Should I do, at that time, my phone was blowing up with journalists calling me. I had political editor of the Times and that sort of thing calling me. Should I do an interview with them? And should we capitalize on this moment? Or should we kind of just stay quiet and, wait for it to blow over? And in the end, we decided to chart a middle course, and we did email our family. We did put something on Instagram, but I didn't do the kind of the big interview, just for sort of balance of risk, I guess.
What was the risk that you saw? Can you talk us through a bit more how the board sort of helped you weigh up those alternatives? When
you do a live interview with someone whose job is to make it something a story, and I'm media trained like I mean, I did like a half day thing 10 years ago, if you call that media training. I'm not a politician, I'm not like a seasoned PR kind of person. So the chance that I would just accidentally, they would ask something about Akshata, and I really like Akshata. I think she invested in KoruKids because she loved our mission. She wanted to support women, and so I might start talking about that, and then just accidentally say something that Labour could then seize upon, and so just the risk that I would screw it up was just really high.
And as you sort of look back on that, is there anything, for a board member listening who finds themselves in that situation, what would be your counsel to them if they gave you a call and said, Rachel, I know you went through this. Any advice that I can give to my founder right now?
I think emotional support is always appreciated. Also think beyond the CEO to the team as well. One of the things that I was very conscious of was making sure that my team kind of understood what we were doing, making sure that, because you remember your team is getting contacted by their friends and family who are seeing this and know they work there. And so you want to give them the right information so that they can feel really good about what they're doing. So I internally was kind of saying, look, no one is saying that we're doing anything wrong. We need to stand proud. There's no posture of shame when we may make mistakes. I was kind of making sure I was really clear on that internally for them. So emotional support to CEO, emotional support to the team if need be, and I think probably going with whatever your CEO's maybe tolerance or strengths are with PR. So I actually really like PR. I mean, I do podcasts, and I do talk to journalists. I'm speaking to the BBC later on today about AI and recruiting, and that will be a live interview. And I'm comfortable doing that, but there is a point, and I think that's the point that I just described to you before, beyond which I'm kind of going, I do not have the background for this. This is too much of a tinderbox. And so I think that my board was very good at respecting that. When I said, this is not it, they were like, okay, fine. So what I would hate is for someone to push their CEO into something that they didn't feel they had the background for.
Can we deep dive into that third moment you talked about, which was the moment when you moved into home nurseries? So when did you first sense that the home nursery model might not work?
I think there was a key personnel change. So I had an FD who left for a different role. And at that point, I decided to bring in a more experienced, more seasoned CFO person who then has internally transitioned to becoming our COO, who is still with business now. And it was during that transition when he came in initially as CFO. And one of the first things he wanted to do which was brilliant, was a really ground up, question everything, kind of take me through all the unit economics thing. And I remember it was only, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It wasn't long into his thing where he kind of came to me and said, we really need to I'm not sure about this. And it wasn't like we didn't know. I mean, it wasn't like everyone was blind and thought it was brilliant, and then he came in and said there was a problem. It was more gradual than that. But that moment of transition between roles did force a reevaluation. So that was an important moment. What was also going on, though, at the same time, the reason that it was difficult was because it was COVID at the same time. And COVID, you can imagine, for childcare, just threw everything up in the air. And when you're starting a new service, it's incredibly hard to distinguish not working and not working yet. And you're constantly looking at the signal, but you're trying really hard to distinguish signal from noise. And so we knew the unit economics were not working. That was not a surprise to us. The question was, are we on the trajectory? Are the reasons that they're not working things that are to do with COVID and are going to change when COVID ends? Or maybe we're separately on a trajectory. And then importantly, what was our runway, and did we have time to improve them, and could we believe in that trajectory? So it was a whole load of things that we had to kind of untangle. And it was him coming in and doing that kind of big look that made us look at it and go, do you know what? I don't think so.
And as you look back on it now, were there different questions that you could have asked before you went into it that would have identified that answer up front? Or was it inevitable that you needed to go through the experience of testing to learn?
I think more the latter, because one of the really useful things that someone said to me afterwards that I passed on to the team was, we should consider ourselves kind of like a laboratory, like a scientific laboratory. And I think this is quite a useful way to think about startups. There are certain things that it turns out are a great business model. And there are certain things that it turns out that people think are going to be a great business model, and it turns out are not. And tons of super smart people around the world have tried to do some of these things. So, fast delivery of groceries might be an example, where a lot of really smart people thought, okay, let's try it, and they funded it. And it turns out that it only works in very specific geographies, very specific use cases, and it can't be generalized. And there are lots of other kind of examples of that, of different things that it turns out don't quite work. And I just think it's not, maybe if we at AGI, maybe an AI can model the complexity of the world and determine these things up front. But I don't think a bunch of humans and an Excel sheet can actually do it. I think if you erred on the side of caution, you just never would have a lot of the great companies that have reshaped the world right now. So I prefer to think of us as scientists who have been given a grant to go and try out, thrash our guts out to try and make it work. I think the job is you take the money and you absolutely try your damnedest to make it work. And then if it works, great. And if it didn't, well, you still did your job.
If you're listening to these conversations and thinking, I'd love some support as I build my own board journey, that's exactly what the Enter the Boardroom community is for. It's the destination for current and aspiring board members, offering practical guidance, trusted insight, and a high-caliber peer community to help you build a credible board portfolio and succeed in today's boardrooms. Listeners can get 10% off. Head to etb.newroll.com and use the code ENTER at checkout. That's etb.newroll.com. You talked about those three different moments, the sort of the term sheets and getting the right term sheets, navigating that PR crisis, and then the strategic discussion around whether to go into home nurseries or not. Has there been a moment where an individual board member has added standout value for you as a founder?
I think yes. And it was the times when, and the people who were most deeply grounded in the business context. So for me, there's a real myth that board members should stay high level. And I think I have found the opposite. The board members who really dive deep into the metrics. I had one board member who used to have our dashboards for about 3-4 years. Our dashboards constantly open on his computer, and he had about 50 tabs constantly open from lots of different companies. He was a numbers assessor, metrics assessor, and it was amazing because he actually properly understood what the metrics were, could spot trends. And one of the things that is really, really, really useful and value add from a board member is if someone can both deeply understand the metrics, but also check in with them at a high level, then that can be really, really powerful, because as a CEO, you've got all this complexity in your head. You are a bit clouded by it. And sometimes you don't see these kind of big, broader things that are going on. Whereas someone who's only looking at the metrics might be able to ask you, say, oh, that looks a bit weird, or why is the gap here? Some of these really, really great questions. And I found that at times has led to oh, wow, you're right, our margins have deteriorated. We didn't spot that, or whatever the thing is.
Can you give me a specific example that brings that to life, where that metric obsession actually influenced your behavior in the business?
Maybe something to do with pricing. I can't think of the specific example, but ideas around pricing might be one. I think the whole board structure was created before the internet. And then what happened was, with the internet, you get access to a lot of conventional wisdom. So it's no longer enough just to bring conventional wisdom. Maybe it used to be. Maybe being on a board in the 70s, it was enough to kind of bring some like generic wisdom or advice. Now you can get that instantly. And I think with AI, you can now get personalized conventional wisdom, right? So it's even more, I think the bar for being a useful board member has risen even higher now. And so now I think that you need to be really the need or the return on being really deep in the company metrics is even higher than it used to be.
Can you bucket the different sorts of value you've got from your board members at different moments? So you've talked there about that persona who is all over the metrics and is sort of helping you spot trends that you might have missed. Talked about the strategic discussions and the support during sort of moments of crisis. What other big buckets of value have you got from different board members at different times?
One of the things that I've had is hyper growth background and really pushing the limits of our thinking for how fast we can move. That was very helpful during our sort of hyper growth 50 backstage. I think another thing that I have really appreciated is we have NESTA on our board, which is NESTA is a government-funded organization. And so their lines of questioning are often, they do have commercial questions as well, but their lines of questioning are often about quality and about, how are we measuring quality? How are we measuring, other aspects of social mission, that sort of thing. And I really appreciate being asked those questions as well.
Why?
I think one of the major functions of a board for me is keeping us accountable. And so I think there's a sort of myth sometimes that if you have a board meeting during which nothing happened, like a non-momentous board meeting, it was a waste of time. And I think it wasn't a waste of time because I know that I know about the forcing function of having that board meeting. Just the fact of having to pull together our coherent strategy, having to pull together our numbers. I can't tell you how often we've been preparing for a board meeting and we've been pulling together the numbers and the story. And then all of a sudden we realize, oh, wow, that doesn't add up, or, we need to fix that. There's often an operational scramble in the 2 weeks before a board meeting, but because of the board meeting and the forcing function and the accountability. And that is true for commercial things, but also true for social mission or quality things. We might go to pull our NPS results for a particular part of our funnel and realize that we haven't had any for the past 3 weeks because something's broken. So a tag broke, and we wouldn't have, if we hadn't had to do that reporting, we might not have noticed that. It's that kind of thing.
So that sort of feeds into that whole idea that planning is indispensable, but plans are useless. Has your board always comprised only of investor directors, or have you ever brought in independents?
No, always investor directors.
And what's been your rationale for that? Where do you get your source of challenge and support away from the investor directors?
So I'm someone who asks for help a lot, and I'm part of various founder networks, and I'm pretty active in them, and have always gone to these peers and people who are slightly ahead of me a lot for advice or experiences rather than advice. And I found that totally invaluable. I'm also someone who reads a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm constantly kind of seeking insight from everywhere. And I've always actually thought that when people often ask me for thoughts on choosing an investor or, and having an investor on your board, and people I have often been asked by investors, what kind of thing are you looking for? What are you looking for from an investor? With the idea being, oh, I'd like expertise in this or that for my board. I've always found it a mistake to conflate those two things. So, for example, if we were to expand to America, would it be useful to have someone on our board with expansion to America experience? Yeah, of course it would. Like, it's like, would you like an ice cream? Yeah, sure. Like, I would like it. But what difference would it make if I didn't? Well, if I didn't, I'd just go out and find one of, 20 people that I can think of right now that I could go and ask. And I'd just have a series of coffees and it wouldn't be that different. And in fact, I would want a range of experiences anyway. So I would probably do that anyway. So the board person would end up being one of 20, which, yeah, fine. Like, I'd like an ice cream. I mean, it's better that they have more context rather than don't, but it's not a huge deal. And so I've always thought that it's a mistake to conflate those things because there's so many sources of insight in the world that aren't your board. And so the advantage that the board has, because that kind of leads to the question of, well, what is the thing then that your board can do that you can't get from just having a really great network and drawing on it? But I think the two things that your board can give you that you can, one is continuity of your story over time. So, if they have followed it closely for 2 years, they just have so much more context. The second one is they can see your metrics in a way that you just wouldn't do with a friend. You wouldn't force them to kind of read lots and lots of dashboards. And so that's why I say the deeper they can get, like the more into it they can get into your personal situation, that's when I think the board member really starts to have an edge.
And have you, because in past guests and into the boardroom who've come from a sort of founder background have typically struggled with the narrowness of the way investor directors approach the board. Typically, they haven't had any operating experience. And for many of them, that having someone who's been an operator in that room has just made the dynamic of that conversation much easier at times, getting the investors to step back and sharing often the discussion and making it easier for the founder to run the board or running the board for the founder so that the founder CEO can get on with running the business. Doesn't sound like that's been an issue for you. What do you think you're doing well with sort of running the board or the way you're going about running the board that's meant that's not been an issue for you?
I think a couple of things have been on our side. So one is that we actually have had investor operators on the board. So I think if Neil, who was my guy at Atomico, he had been an operator. He'd been very senior in Uber before he became an investor. And that was actually a large part of why I wanted him on the board. It was exciting to me that I was going to get access to this incredible experience from, a relevant thing. It was a marketplace. He had done international. That was what his role was. He has international. And, sure enough, he bought all these really great experiences. And when I said before about having perspectives of hyperscale, that was coming from him. So partly it was selecting investors who had been operated. And then, but I did have other people on the board who were purely investors. And the best thing that they did, and I'm thinking of Ed from Albion's, who I'm very happy to name because he was a wonderful early board member who we had for several years. And the thing that Albion in general, and including Ed, was really, really great at, and his successful Paul as well, was they knew what they did. They knew their expertise, and they knew what wasn't their expertise. And I think that is just so powerful. I've got another investor who's not on my board who I can also name as a great example of this, Richard Reed from Jam Jar. So they're one of our investors. And so Albion and Ed and Paul, they the thing they know about is financing, fundraising, like the financial side of things. With Richard Reed, his thing is marketing and brand. So two very different, completely different things. And the thing that is so great about all of those people is they don't randomly opine on things that they don't know about. So Ed would never come to me with a kind of marketing idea or, start to randomly talk about brand. He might ask a question about it. He might get curious about it. It's not like he doesn't talk about it. But when you can tell when he's at his area of expertise, and he's really good at not faking it, basically, not bullshitting is what I'm talking about. And Richard, exactly the same when it comes to marketing.
Can we zoom out and talk about something slightly different, which is why boards need to think more about supporting parents? Because for many early stage businesses, the idea of providing enhanced parental pay and support can feel like a luxury they just can't afford. And at the same time, it's not economically viable for parents to survive without some form of support. So really interested to hear about how your board has thought about this as a governance issue.
It's definitely a huge societal issue. As you know, birth rates are falling in the UK and just about every country. It's a big societal level problem. I think we make a mistake when we think of this as an individual problem. It is an existential human society problem. And it is also obviously true that parenting has become structurally harder for all sorts of reasons to do with the cost of living, the cost of housing, the stagnation in real wage growth, and I think the expectations on parents, the sort of intensive child raising culture that we're in at the moment, where back in the 70s and 80s and previously it was a lot more sort of free range, chuck your kids out at the start of the day and maybe they'll come home before dusk. We don't have that anymore. So parents are being squeezed from absolutely all sides. I'm a huge fan of the Swedish approach, which is the use it or lose it. I think shared parental leave has been a quite nice addition to the landscape, but because we don't have the use it or lose it, it hasn't actually been taken up that much. So the difference is, but for anyone listening who doesn't know what I'm talking about, in Sweden, there's a large portion of paternity leave that if the dad doesn't take it, it's lost completely. And that's what we don't have in the UK. But in the UK, you can transfer parental leave between the mum and the dad. And that's cool, but in Sweden, they have this amount where if the dad doesn't take it, it's gone forever. And that has it's a small amount of time in the scheme of things, but it has a really cascading effect, because what that means is the dads end up at baby groups during this time, and then that changes the culture of, who goes to baby groups, who's in the playground, who's doing pickup. And then simultaneously, it means that if they're looking after the baby solo for a few months just by themselves, they start to know who's the GP, what vaccinations have been had, where is the supplier of this particular thing that this kid needs. They might make other dad friends. The dad friends then grow up with them. It's them who are also arranging the play date. And so it goes through the whole of childhood, that's the effect that we don't have here in the UK. And that's the change I'd like.
Rachel, time has flown, which means it's time for the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a short question and ask you for a quick response if you're ready.
Yep, great.
Best book every board member should read, and why?
Best book any board member should read is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It is the best book at laying out the root causes of conflict and how to have way better discussions.
Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah, I think so.
Boardroom behaviour that irritates you most?
Not reading the papers. And I have to say that doesn't happen on my board.
Most valuable board ritual?
We have a shared Google sheet. So we have a shared Google document, and we send it out ahead of time. And it's got the whole pack in it, and anyone can ask a question. And the reason that is really useful is that it gets all the easy transactional questions where someone's just asking, what does that metric mean again? Or can you explain this? You get all of that out of the way before the board meeting. And it allowed me the day before the board meeting to look at all the comments and then, if necessary, rejig the agenda, because I can see where the weight of discussion is going to be. And that is the single greatest practice that turns a transactional meeting into a really useful strategic discussion.
A question every board should ask at least once a year.
How are you measuring quality? How is it trending? And what are your continuous improvement systems?
What's a boardroom myth you think needs busting?
I think people think that if a board meeting wasn't momentous, it was a waste of time. And it's not true, because the accountability drives a lot of action outside the meeting.
Favourite quote?
Childcare is infrastructure.
Your most significant professional insight?
It is actually possible to find a nanny to pick up your kids at 3:00 and look after them at your home until 6:00.
A piece of board advice that sounds right, but is wrong?
Non-execs should stay at a high level and not engage operationally.
What have you changed your mind on about boards over time?
I have figured out how to make them useful. I did not think my meetings were that useful initially, and now they are.
What did you change?
Well, a few things. One of the things was the Google Sheet that I talked about.
What else?
Selecting board members, choosing the topics that we take, thinking about how we frame them, getting my exec members along so that they meet them, lots of different things.
How are you better today as a board member than when you started?
I think I have better judgment on the right level to engage.
Can you just expand on what that means?
I think I have a better sense now of the kinds of questions to take and not to take. So, for example, there are things that if you need a particular introduction to someone, you don't need to do that at a board meeting. You can just WhatsApp them outside the board meeting. Board meeting time should be used for the big strategic questions. And it can be hard to frame those. And it's taken a while to learn how to frame those in a way that is really going to lead to good discussion.
Finally, 3 things our listeners should take away from this episode if they take nothing else.
Number 1, boards should focus and help founders focus. Number 2, bring experience, not abstract lessons or advice. And number 3, obsess over quality and quality systems.
Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and wisdom.
No problem. This has been very great to reflect on. It's not often that you actually get to reflect on these things. So this is like a meta board, like a board for a board, because it's like a forcing function to actually think, when has the board been useful, and what do I do that is either makes my board more or less useful, and there isn't anywhere else in the world where you kind of do that sort of board retro, which actually makes me think maybe there should be a thing like a board retro.
If today's guest has got you reflecting on your own board journey, Enter the Boardroom community is there to support you. Designed for emerging, developing, and established board members, the community brings together expert guidance, structured programs, peer connection, and access to real board opportunities, all without noisy networking or false promises. It's informed by New Roll's Board Insight, but focused on helping you become a stronger, more credible board member. Listeners can get 10% off. Head to etb.newroll.com and use the code ENTER at checkout. That's etb.newroll.com.